Hey there, island dreamers, locals, and anyone craving a slice of paradise. Welcome back, or welcome for the first time, to the Fun and Key West podcast, where the vibe is always laid back, the stories are salty, and the drinks, well, they're definitely frozen. I'm your host, Michelle O'Connor, your unofficial tour guide to the Conch Republic. Whether you're planning your first trip, your fifth trip, or you're just daydreaming about trading the cubicle for the ocean breeze, you are in the right place. Here's the deal. This podcast is your insider's guide to all things Key West. We're talking where to eat, hello, conch fritters and key lime pie, where to drink, spoiler alert, there will be rum, where to stay, and all the quirky, wonderful things that make Key West the one-of-a-kind paradise we all love. Plus, we'll keep you up to date on the latest happenings, festivals, events, maybe even the occasional Hemingway lookalike sighting. And just to keep things spicy, we'll be bringing on some amazing guests now and then, locals, business owners, and people who know the island like the back of their sandy hand. So grab your flip-flops, pour yourself a cold one, and let's escape to the island state of mind together, whether you're tuning in from your hammock or your commute, while wishing it was a hammock. We've got all the Key West goodness coming your way. Thanks for being here. It's going to be a lot of fun in Key West. Let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of Historic Marker Monday. This is where we dig up the wild stories behind all of those plaques you see while you're wandering through Key West. I'm Michelle, and I'm so glad you're here. So imagine this. You wake up and your entire island is underwater. Your house is floating out to sea, and your only hope is clinging to a tree while 150-mile-an-hour winds whip around you. Sounds like a disaster movie, right? Well, for the residents of Key West, this is what they faced when they woke up on October 11th, 1846. Today, we are talking all about the Great Havana Hurricane, a monster storm that literally wiped Key West off the map and then, plot twist, changed it forever. This is the storm that was so powerful, it unearthed a cemetery. Yeah, really. And made an entire lighthouse just disappear. This isn't just a weather report from the 1800s. It's a story about total devastation and the insane resilience that put Key West back on its feet, bigger and bolder than before. So grab a drink. You might need one for this. And let's get into it. Welcome to another episode of Historic Marker Monday. I am Michelle with Fun in Key West, and every Monday we explore some of those historic markers that you find around Key West. And there are a lot of them because the history of Key West is long, and there are so many interesting players and events and happenings that it just takes forever to get through them all, right? But today we're going to be talking about a very devastating event that happened, and this was the 1846 Havana hurricane. Now, as you are watching through this, if you are watching me live on Facebook, thank you for joining us. Let me know you're here and say hi so I can say hi back. If you are listening to us on our podcast, thank you so much for listening. Be sure to like this episode and tell all your friends about what we do over here at Fun in Key West. But imagine you are waking up to find the entire island underwater. Your home is floating out to sea, and your only escape is clinging to a mangrove tree. That's what Key West residents faced on October 11th, 1846. It was one of the most destructive hurricanes in history that slammed into Key West. It was named the Havana Hurricane because it came through Cuba and Havana first before it came to Key West. And it was one of the deadliest storms that Key West had faced up to that point. And it basically changed Key West forever. At that time, in 1846, Key West had a population of about 1,500 people. It was a busy hub because it had that natural deepwater port and its proximity to the Florida Straits. Most of the buildings at this time were wooden structures on coral pilings. You didn't have the cement, you didn't have the brick or anything like that homes were now made out of. They were wooden structures on coral piling. And as you can imagine, they were absolutely no match for a Category 4 hurricane. The estimates of the winds that came through Key West at that time were well in excess of 150 miles an hour, which makes it a Cat 4 hurricane. Lighthouses were crucial for navigation, but these early lighthouses were very vulnerable to storm damage. And back then, imagine, there was no advanced storm warnings. There was no weather station and no weather channel to sit there and watch, Mr. Cantori come to Florida. It was basically word of mouth, and a lot of people would watch the barometric pressure. When I was growing up, my dad had a gauge that hung on our wall in our dining room, and it measured the barometric pressure. And we could tell when storms and fronts were coming through because how the barometric pressure would change. And that was my first exposure to meteorology. And so I can understand how people and the weather forecasters back then used these instruments to think about where these storms might be coming or when they might be coming, but there was no way to visually see them where they were coming from. So the storm arrives on October the 11th, 1846. And like I said, it slammed into Cuba first. That's why it's known as the Havana hurricane. There was a storm surge that came through Key West at 7 to 8 feet is what they're estimating. And it absolutely decimated and flooded downtown Key West Street. When Key West gets a heavy rain and you see all of those Facebook reels and the TikTok videos of Green Street down there all flooded, keep in mind, Key West is at sea level, and it takes a little bit of time for that water to come back down through the system to get itself back out to sea. So a heavy rain will definitely bring some flooding to Key West, especially down in the lower parts of Duval and Green Street. So if you're looking at Key West today, you're going to see that, I could see where heavy rain would come in. But imagine a storm surge that came across at 7 to 8 feet. That's what the storm brought with it. Families went to Solaris Hill, which is the highest point in the island, hoping to think that was the higher point. There were homes swept out to sea. The entire streets were underwater. The Sand Key Lighthouse, along with the entire small island it stood on, vanished beneath the waves of the hurricane. And the Key West Cemetery was partially destroyed. The impact of the water that came through actually unearthed some of the coffins. And what ended up happening was, after the storm receded and Key West began to rebuild, the cemetery was moved to the base of Solaris Hill. So that is not the original location of the Key West Cemetery, but it is where the Key West Cemetery is today, and it's there today because of this hurricane. You had hundreds of boats that were anchored out in the waters around Key West, and they were caught off guard because, again, no hurricane warning. And some sailors cut their masts of their sailboats to ensure that possibly, that could help keep the boat afloat. Some ships were blown over the reefs and were destroyed or left stranded. And unfortunately, there's an unknown number of sailors that perished in the hurricane. So before the storm, there was, like I said, a population of about 1,500 people in Key West. About 60 people are documented to have lost their lives, but obviously we think that there were more. Many survived only by swimming to higher ground. They swam through debris-filled water. If you've seen the images of the storm surge come through, you know that there's a bunch of stuff in that water. And there was a lot of flying debris. Even wood planks from the boats out in the water were seen coming over into the island. Just like today, after a major storm, there were severe shortages of supplies to help the residents of Key West rebuild. But Key West is resilient, if not anything else, and there was a massive rebuilding project put in place. In less than a decade, in less than 10 years, Key West population grew by 300%, and it became a major maritime and shipping hub. And the resiliency of the island's people are seen in this rebuild. The Havana hurricane of 1846 is marked as one of the worst storms in Key West history. It prompted changes, though, that were for the better Building codes and building technique, well, not really building codes, but building techniques improved. Structures were built to be more strong, and eventually they transitioned to be stone and brick. Lighthouse placement and their construction were done with the intent of being out of the way of these storms, but also to sustain the force of these winds and the water. And they worked on creating this maritime preparedness program so that they could see these or be aware that these hurricanes were coming in. Even today, everybody in Florida and the East Coast and up into the Gulf Coast are very aware of the impact of hurricanes and tropical storms. And we've learned over the years that we take these very seriously, and they can be destructive. Even if it's not a Cat 4 or a Cat 5, those storm surges are actually the most damaging part sometimes. Here are little fun facts. Did you know Flores Hill, it's just 18 feet above sea level. There are some reports at 16 feet, but let's go between 16 and 18 feet above sea level. It's the highest point in Key West. As a matter of fact, I think if you're on the conch train, you go over Flores Hill. You had the vanishing lighthouse. So the entire Sand Key Lighthouse and the island it stood on just simply disappeared. And the cemetery had to be moved. And of course, the rapid rebuilding of Key West increased that population of Key West. By the late 1850s, early 1860s, you've had a 300% increase in population. So that is one of the stories. And we've been highlighting some of the hurricanes and the storms that have come through Key West and the Florida Keys here in the last couple of weeks. It is still the middle of hurricane season. You're going to be in the middle of hurricane season until the end of November. And of course, they will burn the hurricane flag in a ceremony to wish it well, and off it goes for the hurricane season until next year. And that's why I always say it's a good idea if you're coming to Key West during hurricane season, get that travel insurance, get that in place, make sure you are flexible on travel, because you may have to evacuate, you may not be able to fly in, you may not be able to drive in. But that is just the absolute adventure of coming to Florida and especially Key West. There is so much more information over at FunInKeyWest.com, especially about the self-guided historic marker tour. Be sure to check that out over there. Be sure to check out our book club. We have a book club where we highlight a book every month that has some sort of Key West, Florida Keys connection. And then, of course, sign up for our newsletter that keeps you in the know every weekend, every Sunday evening-ish. But I can get everything done. I send out the newsletter, recap everything we've done through the week, let you know what's happening, and give you some updates on some really cool things that you can join in if you're not able to be in Key West anytime soon. With that, I am Michelle. You guys have a great Monday. Thanks for stopping in. Tim, good morning. And you guys have a great one. Talk to you later. Well, that's the story of how Key West faced disaster and then came back to life with a 300% population boom. You just can't make this stuff up. It's proof that Key West has been surviving the unsurvivable for centuries with a healthy dose of grit and stubbornness. It really puts a little extra rain on Duval into perspective, doesn't it? Huge thank you for spending time with me today on this wild piece of Key West history. If you want to dive deeper into the island's past and check out the self-guided historic marker tour, you know where to go. Head over to FunInKeyWest.com. If you love this story, do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button. It helps more people find the show, and honestly, it makes my day. Until next time, stay curious, keep exploring, and always, always read those plaques.